Welcome back. I'm Roy with Rugged Badger Racing and Team Parts Badger. This is our Parts Badger ChampCar Miata, and today we're going to talk about a debrief from our race at Autobahn Country Club. Let's dive in. All right, we are going to start at the front of the car, which is now on the back of the car. That is our splitter. Now, we had a number of updates. One is we put these brackets from the old Parts Badger car in place. We actually had these end plates, which I think I got right in here. Pull these out. So these are the end plates that we had installed, like so. You can see that's normal on the bottom, that's going to wear down. They added way too much downforce. It took the car completely out of balance, and even at the highest wing setting, the 9 Lives Racing wing would not be able to compensate. So one thing we're going to do is change the wing position, get more efficiency out of the wing, and hopefully a lot more downforce so we're able to run those moving forward. But this splitter is toast. We crinkled the splitter in the back. There's a crinkle in the front. You can see our temporary support here as well. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 different points where we have support rods, and those support rods failed. So you can see them attached to the car here. So we had 2 different types of failure. One is in this collet area that this actually pulled out. So my guess is we made a little bit of contact that pushed the splitter in, and it was too much force, pulled the rod out of this little collet mechanism. Now, we also had a failure on this one where the hardware up here actually came loose, and you can see this is a nylock hardware. But it's right on the edge of that bolt, so maybe the bolt's not long enough, and then that's why that came out. We needed to do a temporary fix in the pits, but our splitter is done for. Got to make a new one. All right, diagnostic on the motor. Now, if you remember last time, we blew the motor. We had a lean issue, which we replaced the ECU. The new ECU works great. Definitely took care of the AFR problems. Now we're running in the mid-12s. Every now and then we hit 13 or so. With the old system, we were in the mid to high 13s. Every now and then we'd hit 14. So the new ECU is doing the trick. The motor overall is interesting. So I went through and I did 3 things. One is I scoped the pistons. So I put a camera down there. I looked at the pistons. They all look great. No issues with the pistons. I did a leak down test. Number 1 is perfect. Number 2 is perfect. Number 3 is perfect. Maybe 5% leak down. Actually, a little less than 5%. However, we have about 40%. I think we had 60% maintained pressure on cylinder number 4. So I ran a compression test. It is leaking out of the intake valves on the leak down test, but the compression test is normal. So we compression test all these. Everything looks good from a compression test wise. We had good power. I don't know what's happening, why those intake valves aren't sealing properly, but it's not affecting the compression test like it is the leak down. I don't know what that means. Nonetheless, we're gonna run it. Moving on to the exhaust, we had a ton of issues with these header bolts. And I think if you can look on these studs, I think the studs have anti-seize on them. So what I began to do, as they loosened, I put high temp Loctite red on these studs. And since the header has remained tight, we also double bolted up here, and then we double bolted down on the downpipe section. So all of that remained just fine, no issues. Now from last time, we had a lot of issues with our accessory belt. So our tensioner and the pulley itself, we went ahead, we Loctited those. I have safety wire there. We also moved to a mechanical tensioner, safety wire on that as well. No issues, seems to resolve it. And then the pulley, I did move to a genuine GM OEM type pulley because the last one cracked on us. Now for the radio, last time we had antenna issues, we added this new flat antenna that we had left over from the Parts Badger car. We changed up the wiring so it did not interfere with the aim. Last time the aim was cutting out when we transmitted radio, at least the camera system, which is right there. So number 1 is the camera system's fine. It no longer cuts out when we're transmitting because those cables are now far from each other. That resolved that issue, but we still have intermittent radio issues. I don't know exactly what it is or why, but we're gonna dive into the harness and still try to figure out what this intermittent harness issue. I don't believe it's related to the antenna, but who knows? Now, one of the issues we were having is related to the exhaust. You can see here, we have a cracked exhaust. So we put a end plate in place as a heat shield. It actually cracked in the test day. We had a flex pipe here. We welded a straight pipe in place, and then that straight pipe cracked about 2 hours into the first race. Now we finished the first race. We ran an additional 5 hours just fine with no issues. So we actually ran like this the second day. The only thing we added was this bent up end plate to add a little bit more shielding. Now you would think The transmission's gonna get pretty hot. Fuel's gonna be an issue. It's gonna get hot in the car. Everything actually was really fine. We didn't have any heat issues, even though that exhaust was broken. Transmission stayed nice and cool. The transmission tunnel stayed nice and cool. And yes, we had some fuel things, but I don't think it was related to the exhaust because it didn't necessarily correlate with what was happening with the exhaust temperatures. Now, one of the upgrades we did, you can see here, we have these vents put in place. So we put one vent in before, we put one vent in after the test day because it was hot and it was getting really hot under the engine bay. So this venting system, this seemed to help, especially over that header. It gets hot, but definitely adding that second one, I think it was needed. Now, if it rains, I'm a little concerned with where these are because it's on top of all of these electronics as it relates to the fuel injector plugs, as it relates to the throttle body. We have a map sensor under there, pretty much a whole bunch of electronics, including the ECU, right in this area. So I'm gonna be a little concerned if it rains. Maybe we'll just tape that up. Now, over to this side of the car. Now, if you've seen some of the videos, you know on the test day, Nick had a little oopsie, ran into a CRX team on this corner. Now, what that did, that bent the tie rod arm. So we replaced the tie rod arm. We also replaced the tie rod end. We ended up replacing the lower ball joint as well as the hub. Now, the hub, we actually used our spare hub. We put that in place. The spare hub went out, so we put the impacted hub back on, and the impacted hub is now bad. So we had a collision on a hub. We had a spare hub, which is now bad, and then the hub that collided, we put that back in. That is now bad. So we lost 2 front hubs all on this corner. All right, now if you remember my brake videos, I am really excited about these brakes, and I'm excited about the brakes because of pad wear. The teams that I've rented with that have run the same kit, now they use a slightly wider rotor, but the same kit, they have almost no pad wear at all. Now, when we ran Gingerman, we ran the DTC 30 pad up front, which is a much lower bite type pad. Unfortunately, we got a lot of wear out of those. I think they would make it maybe 12 hours or so, but I wasn't confident enough in that. Now, I was having trouble getting additional pads. I had a spare set of DTC 50. I was worried about the bite. So I bought a set of Willwood BP 40 pads, which are racing pads that I believe would be able to stand up to this application. I had those drop shipped or shipped from Amazon to the hotel to make sure I had them. Those pads wore out in one race and they wore down to almost nothing. We had nothing left of those pads after one 7-hour race. So I put the DTC 50 pads in. These are the DTC 50s. Same thing. Almost no pad left. These start out, these are super thick. You can see how far out the pistons are right now. You can see how much fluid is gone. We are almost out of fluid in the master because of how far these pistons are pushed out. This was just one 7-hour race. You can see a little bit of grass in there, but we did have cooling, so we had these vents. So I'm gonna look into some cooling issues. Now I know our left side, or driver's side, was wearing more than our passenger side. We looked at the vent, there's nothing in the vent, but we're gonna change up our duct design a little bit with the next splitter, and hopefully that resolves the issue. I also have some Hawk ER1 pads coming, as well as some PFC 11s coming. We'll see if those are any better. Now, on the rear of the car, we did catch a very slight amount of movement in this hub. We went ahead and we torqued this to specification and pinged this down. No issues since, so maybe it wasn't a hub issue, maybe it was just a little loose, but now that's in place and it's marked, so hopefully we don't have any issues with that moving forward. Moving on to the Coolshirt system. So for this race, we had a lot of issues with the Coolshirt. So the first thing is our controller just stopped working at some point. We have the fast system controller mounted right here. I do not know anything about that wiring, but I do know it stopped on Sunday, the hottest day. So what we did is we manually wired directly to the battery. We had to do that in a pit stop. It took about 45 seconds to get that all switched over. Still live, apparently. So if I touch this ground here, I just set it against this ground point, you can hear it run. So I should probably get that disconnected, but that's hot right now. That's probably not a good thing. The second problem that happened with the Coolshirt is this, we must have forgot to ratchet strap it. It actually turned upside down inside the car. Oh, a third thing, the base plate, which we had 4 bolts in the base plate. When we went to check it, we were down to 1 bolt in the base plate, and those were Loctited. Those were torqued to spec. I don't know why the base plate came loose, but we went ahead and we bolted another in on the brake on Sunday to get the Coolshirt back going. So we got to go through that. We got to rewire it. We'll figure out. I'll make sure the base plate is extra bolted down. Maybe we'll have to double nut that like the exhaust. All right, so let's talk about fuel. Now, if you remember Autobahn, we were having fuel cut issues that we believe was related to the fuel pump in the tank. We weren't sure exactly what was causing it, but we did a couple things. First is we put a vent in the tank, and the vent that we put in replaces the OEM vent to give you more capacity because there's an air pocket in the Miata tank, and this air vent really helps improve the capacity and gets us closer to the plus 2 gallons or so that you can run if you're running a full fuel cell. So what we ended up doing, we put in a surge tank. So we have our, I believe this is 1/2 gallon surge tank. The pump is integrated here, and we put this in there so that the now pump that's in the tank is a lift pump to this, which is our high pressure pump to feed the system. Now, during the test day, we were having fuel issues. So number one is the main tank ran dry, and we ended up cooking the lift pump, which was an Aeromotive pump. Now, I don't know about the Aeromotive pump. I'm going to be careful about how I speak, but I don't necessarily trust that pump. Now, I did buy a brand new spare because I wanted to keep the same, but I have the stock pump back in. I took the Aeromotive out. That thing cooked because it got a little bit dry. I don't know if that's going to be a problem moving forward. Hopefully not. Second issue that we had, you can see we have a new fuel rail installed. The fuel rail that was in the car, Nick was out. It was the returnless style system we were running before. And all of a sudden, he said it was running super lean, and he barely made it into the pits. Once he got in the pits, eventually it kicked in, and he had power back. I felt the fuel rail, and the fuel rail was really, really hot. So my guess is that we were actually having a vapor lock, and the situation he was running into was caused by that. So very quickly, we took out that rail. We ran a return line, moved to this return style system because I bought this rail ahead of time because I didn't know what our fuel issue was before. It turned out to be the ECU, which we replaced. Nonetheless, we got a new fuel rail installed with a fuel pressure regulator so we can control our own fuel pressure, and we were able to run a few laps on the test day, and that seemed to resolve the issue. Now, we still have a little bit of wandering. I don't know if that's related to the pump itself or if it's related to this fuel pressure regulator. That's something we're going to have to investigate, but overall, that issue from Gingerman is solved. All right, so that is my debrief of the Autobahn Country Club race. Check out our full video. Now, if you like this content, please remember to like and subscribe below. I need subscribers if you want me to keep making this. If I don't get any subscribers, I'm probably going to stop. So if you want me to stop, dislike, don't subscribe, comment that I'm wasting my time and I shouldn't do this, and I will stop making these videos. Nonetheless, I appreciate everybody for watching. I hope this was helpful. We have some fun stuff coming up, in particular a grid life event that we're going to be doing next. So I'm going to start getting to work on this car. Let's get these things fixed up and on to grid life.